Learn English through story. The dark desire of passion. In the heart of a bustling city, where the bright lights illuminated the nights and the air was thick with ambition, there lived a woman named Sophie. She was a writer, but the vibrancy of her craft had faded into a dull echo of what it once was. As she stared at her laptop, the screen remained blank, much like her heart, a canvas untouched, longing for color, passion, and the exhilarating spark that once fueled her creativity. Sophie was in her late 20s, trapped in a monotonous routine that left her feeling more like a spectator of life than a participant. Her days were filled with mundane tasks, and her evenings with empty conversations with Mark, her boyfriend of 4 years. Mark was everything society deemed as a perfect partner, stable, kind, and dependably, but he lacked the fire that ignited Sophie's soul. Their relationship had become a comfortable prison, and while Sophie appreciated Mark's steadfastness, she yearned for something more, yes, something raw, something alive. One evening, as Sophie flipped through a worn notebook filled with half-finished stories and sketches, she came across an old invitation to a poetry reading at a nearby cafe. Copyright, known for its intimate atmosphere and eclectic crowd, with a mixture of hope and desperation, she decided to attend, hoping to find inspiration amidst the spoken word and the energy of creative souls. The cafe copyright was a small, dimly lit space filled with mismatched furniture and walls adorned with local art. As she settled into her seat, a sense of anticipation washed over her. The air was charged with a kind of electricity that sent a shiver down her spine. She listened intently as poets took to the stage, pouring their hearts out, their words dripping with passion and vulnerability. But it was the third poet of the evening who captured her attention completely. Julian stepped onto the stage with an air of confidence that drew the audience in. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his deep-set eyes seemed to hold secrets waiting to be unraveled. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and compelling, weaving tales of love, loss, and the kind of passion that could consume a person whole. Sophie found herself hanging on to every word, her heart racing in a way it hadn't in years. As the night progressed, Julian's eyes met Sophie's in the crowd, and she felt a magnetic pull. It was as if they shared an unspoken connection that transcended the noise of the world around them. When the reading concluded, Sophie mustered the courage to approach him. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a dance of words that sparked excitement within her. He was witty, insightful, and challenging in ways that Mark had never been. They exchanged numbers, and as Sophie walked home that night, her mind buzzed with possibilities. She hadn't felt this alive in ages. Over the next few weeks, their conversations turned into texts and late-night phone calls, and finally, they arranged to meet again. With every meeting, Sophie found herself captivated by Julian's world. He introduced her to the underground art scene, where creativity blossomed like wildflowers. They explored art galleries, attended readings, and even ventured to secret rooftop parties where the city skyline sprawled beneath them like a shimmering blanket. Julian ignited a passion in Sophie that she thought had long been extinguished. As her feelings for Julian deepened, Sophie grappled with her loyalty to Mark. She adored his unwavering support, the way he always knew how to soothe her doubts. Yet the exhilaration Julian brought into her life was intoxicating. Each stolen moment with Julian felt like a rebellion against the ordinary, a thrilling escape from the confines of her predictable existence. The dark desire for passion began to consume her thoughts, spiraling into an obsession she couldn't ignore. She would sit in cafe tilde copyrights, writing furiously about her experiences, pouring her heart onto the pages as she balanced her feelings for both men. With Mark, there was safety, stability, and the promise of a future. But with Julian, there was wildness, a taste of freedom she had long craved. One rainy afternoon, while wrapped in a cocoon of emotions, Sophie received a text from Julian inviting her to an art exhibit opening that evening. The thrill of the invitation sent her heart racing, and she quickly made plans to leave work early. That evening, she donned her favorite red dress, a vibrant contrast to the gray, rainy streets outside. The gallery buzzed with energy, and as she entered, she spotted Julian across the room, surrounded by a group of artists and admirers. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he excused himself to come greet her. "You look stunning," he said, his gaze lingering on her lips. Sophie felt a rush of heat flood her cheeks, and in that moment, she knew she was falling deeper into his magnetic pull. As the evening unfolded, Julian introduced Sophie to his world, sharing stories of his life as a poet and artist. They laughed, flirted, and lost track of time. The chemistry between them crackled like electricity, drawing them closer. When he leaned in to whisper something funny in her ear, his breath tickled her skin, igniting a spark that sent her heart racing. But as the night wore on, Sophie's conscience nagged at her. She glanced at her phone, seeing messages from Mark, wondering what he might think if he knew where she was. Guilt settled in the pit of her stomach. Yet the thrill of being with Julian pushed her doubts aside. Later, as they stepped out into the cool night air, Julian reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Let's get away from here," he suggested, his voice low and enticing. Sophie felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. They wandered the streets, hand in hand, until they found themselves on a secluded rooftop overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, the skyline illuminated like a sea of stars. Sophie felt alive, her heart pounding with exhilaration. Julian turned to her, his expression serious. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he said, his voice dripping with sincerity. "There's something about you that pulls me in." Sophie's heart raced as he leaned closer, his lips brushing against hers in a gentle kiss. It was electric, igniting a fire within her that spread like wildfire. In that moment, the world faded away, and all that mattered was the passion they shared. But as their kiss deepened, a wave of guilt crashed over Sophie. She pulled away, her breath shaky. "I can't do this," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "I have a boyfriend." Julian's eyes searched hers, filled with understanding but also a hint of frustration. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie. You're holding back your true self." As she stood there, Torn between the allure of passion and the weight of responsibility, Sophie realized she was at a crossroads. The dark desire for something more had consumed her, leading her down a path fraught with danger and uncertainty. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself increasingly entangled in Julian's world, sneaking around behind Mark's back, weaving lies to cover her tracks. The thrill of their stolen moments became addictive, but the consequences of her choices began to surface. Mark sensed a shift in Sophie's demeanor. She was distracted, her mind often elsewhere, and their once meaningful conversations dwindled to small talk. He tried to reach out, asking if everything was all right, but Sophie brushed off his concerns, burying herself deeper in her dual life. One fateful night, after a particularly intense encounter with Julian, Sophie returned home to find Mark waiting for her. His expression was a mix of worry and hurt. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice strained. Sophie's heart raced as she struggled to find the right words. "I was out with friends," she lied, avoiding his gaze. "Don't lie to me, Sophie," Mark replied, his voice firm yet gentle. "I can feel that something's off. You're not yourself anymore." In that moment, Sophie felt the walls closing in around her. The weight of her deceit hung heavy on her conscience, threatening to suffocate her. But instead of confessing, she clung to her facade, desperate to protect the thrilling escape Julian provided. As the weeks passed, the tension between Sophie and Mark grew unbearable. Their once cherished routine crumbled as they navigated the chasm that had formed between them. Sophie often found solace in Julian's arms, but each rendezvous only deepened her inner turmoil. One night, after a particularly heated argument with Mark, Sophie found herself in Julian's apartment, seeking refuge from her guilt and confusion. The moment she stepped inside, the familiar thrill washed over her, but this time, it felt tainted. "Is everything all right?" Julian asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Sophie hesitated, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "You have to be true to yourself, Sophie. You can't let fear hold you back." But in that moment, Sophie realized that the darkness of her desire had clouded her judgment. The intoxicating thrill of passion had morphed into a dangerous obsession, leaving her feeling more lost than ever. The following days were a blur of emotions as Sophie wrestled with her choices. The exhilaration she once felt faded, replaced by a sense of dread. She started pulling away from Julian, feeling trapped between two worlds. As she spent more time alone, Sophie turned to her writing for solace. She poured her heart onto the pages, exploring the tangled web of her desires and regrets. Her words flowed like a cathartic release, revealing the darkness within her that she had been too afraid to confront. Then came the day when everything changed. Mark confronted Sophie about her growing distance, his hurt evident in his eyes. "I love you, Sophie, but I can't keep doing this if you're not all in," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. In that moment, Sophie felt the weight of her choices crash down upon her like a tidal wave. She could no longer deny the truth. Her heart was torn between two very different paths, with tears streaming down her face. She made a decision. She couldn't continue to deceive Mark, nor could she allow herself to be consumed by Julian's dark allure any longer. She needed to reclaim her life and her passion on her own terms. The following day, Sophie met Julian at their favorite cafe. Copyright. The familiar thrill of anticipation was overshadowed by a heavy sense of finality. As they sat across from each other, Sophie took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. "Julian," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I can't do this anymore. I've lost myself in this obsession, and it's hurting everyone involved." Julian's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "I knew this day would come," he replied softly, his gaze unwavering. "But Sophie, you have to follow your heart. I need to figure out who I'm without you, without Mark," she said, her heart breaking at the thought of leaving behind the passion that had ignited her soul. As they parted ways, a bittersweet ache settled in her chest. Sophie knew she had made the right decision, yet the darkness of desire still lingered in her mind. In the weeks that followed, Sophie dedicated herself to her writing, channeling her emotions into her work. She wrote about love and loss, passion and regret, exploring the complexities of the human heart. Slowly, she began to rediscover her voice, and with it, a sense of clarity emerged. Sophie reached out to Mark, and they began to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of honesty. They had difficult conversations, navigating the pain of betrayal while striving to understand each other better. It was a slow process, but they worked through their challenges together, each step bringing them closer to a renewed sense of trust. In time, Sophie found herself embracing her own desires, acknowledging the darkness that had once consumed her but refusing to let it define her. She learned to navigate the fine line between passion and obsession, understanding that true fulfillment lay not in the whirlwind of desire, but in the authenticity of her own heart. Through her writing, Sophie poured her experiences into a novel that resonated with readers, capturing the essence of love, passion, and the journey of self-discovery. As her work gained recognition, she felt a sense of empowerment blooming within her. The once lost woman had found her voice again, not only as a writer but as a woman who had dared to confront her darkest desires. Years later, as Sophie sat in a cafe copyright, a sense of peace enveloped her. She had forged her own path, learned from the shadows of her past, and emerged stronger than ever. The vibrant city outside her window still pulsed with life, but now, she felt truly alive within it. Her journey had taught her that while passion could ignite a fire, it was the exploration of self, the understanding of one's desires, that ultimately led to true fulfillment. Sophie had embraced the dark desire of passion, transformed it, and emerged into the light, forever grateful for the lessons learned along the way. And so, as she put pen to paper once more, she knew that the story of her life was still being written, filled with love, laughter, and the ever-present spark of passion that burned bright within her heart. The Dark Desire of Passion is a story of love, self-discovery, and the complexities of human emotion. It explores how passion can lead us astray while reminding us of the importance of authenticity and understanding ourselves. Sophie's journey teaches us that while desire can consume us, it is through self-exploration and honesty that we find true fulfillment and the courage to embrace our passions without losing our sense of self. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.